Imagine you've just stepped out into your back garden on a quiet weekend morning. Birds are chirping. Sunlight filters through the old trees. Everything seems peaceful. Until you stumble upon a strange hole next to the fence. A hole that isn't yours. A hole that wasn't part of your gardening plan. And then one day you discover a buried treasure. Not from the 18th century but from a 10-year-old boy playing pirates. Welcome to one of those strange stories. The line between innocence and trespass. Between childish imagination and adult boundaries. This isn't just a dispute over a dug-up lawn. It's a question of boundaries, respect, and conflicting views between two generations. How much tolerance should adults have for children's imaginations? And do children, even innocent ones, have the right to turn other people's private spaces into a stage for their own games? Today, in this emotional and paradoxical episode of Judgy Tales, you will hear the true story of a resident living in a peaceful suburb. He, a calm, reserved, somewhat pleasant person, accidentally became the villain in the imaginary novel of The Boy Next Door, just because he dared to protect his own lawn. Sounds petty, right? But did you know that it is from such petty things that we uncover the deeper layers of modern society? When the unspoken boundaries are crossed by innocence, when apologies are replaced by blame, when kindness is considered rigid, we begin to wonder, who is wrong? The story begins like any other story, from peace. And then, layer by layer, you will witness the gentle yet profound confrontation between two worlds. One side is a boy living fully in his imagination, the other side is an adult trying to maintain order and privacy in his own living space. But when adults are called dream destroyers, fairy tale villains, just because they say no, is that fair? You will be led through a series of unexpected events. From strange holes that grow after a quiet night, to treasures filled with Pokemon cards and coins, from a very sympathetic mother who turns verbally attacking in just a few lines, to emotional messages blaming the lawn for being too straight. We don't just tell you, we will analyze, feel, and judge with you. Because this is not just a story to be heard and forgotten, it is a test for each of us. If you were in that situation, what would you do? Would you give in to give the children space to imagine? Or would you draw a clear line and accept being made the bad guy in their eyes? Be prepared. There are no monsters in this story, but there are some unexpected hurts. There are no real swords, but there are words that are sharper than blades. And there is no real treasure map, but there is an emotional map that leads us to a land of anger, frustration, and confusion. Who is right? Who is wrong? Or are we both stuck in the gray area of modern society, where kindness is sometimes misunderstood, and innocence can be turned into an unconscious weapon? Let's explore this story. And remember to hold off on judging until you hear it all the way through. To fully understand the seemingly simple story of a lawn and a few holes, we must first return to the starting point. A quiet residential area where families live close to each other but do not really know each other. Everyone keeps a safe distance. Enough to nod when meeting, enough to ask about the weather, but rarely crosses the line of disturbing. The narrator of this story is a calm man, not too old but not too young. He does not give his name, does not describe himself too much, but from his story, we see the image of an adult who lives by principles and respects peace. He lives alone in a small house with a backyard that is just enough. Not a paradise, but enough for a person to be proud of keeping it neat and clean. The grass is cut regularly, the trees are neatly trimmed, and the small shed, although old, is still regularly cared for. For him, the backyard is not just a piece of land that he owns. It is also his own space where he feels safe, secure, and in control. He is not the social type, but not to the point of being aloof. He is polite, courteous, but not overly open. His neighborhood relationships are like faint chalk marks on a blackboard, marked but not bold. Communication is limited to basic politeness. Nodding, smiling, and occasionally a few small talks about the weather, and the weather. The two houses are exactly 2 doors apart, close enough to see each other, but far enough away to pretend not to see if necessary. This family consists of a middle-aged couple and a boy of about 9 to 10 years old, the second main character of the story, but also the source of all the disruption that follows. The boy, although he has no name, has a brilliant personality. Unlike other kids glued to their phones or games, he lives in his own fantasy world. Lately, he's been in pirate mode. Every day he's been playing the role of a little Captain Jack Sparrow, blindfolded, holding a paper sword, shouting "Ye be cursed" at squirrels running across the fence. Part of us, and the storyteller, finds this cute, a healthy and creative way to play. At first it was just remote entertainment. Adults chuckled at the distant pirate shouts, thinking it was just a passing game. But a child's imagination doesn't stop at the boundaries of fantasy. It tends to go beyond the boundaries, both literally and figuratively. Then small holes started to appear near the storyteller's fence. At first he thought it was the work of raccoons or weasels, since the neighborhood still had a few wild animals visiting at night. But then the holes grew larger, deeper, and eventually appeared behind the warehouse, an area that only someone who deliberately snuck in could reach. And then the first treasure appeared. A half-buried tin box filled with Pokémon cards, toy trinkets, and crumpled dollar bills, all wrapped up in the vivid imagination of a child. But what made things unsettling wasn't the treasure itself. It was where it was buried, on someone else's land. The narrator, a calm adult, did not lose his temper. He gently asked the child why he was digging there. And the boy, with a determined look in his eyes, declared, "I'm hiding treasure. No one can know. This is the perfect place." A statement that made the adults smile at the innocence, but also made them frown at the brazenness. After the reminder, he thought that would be the end of it. But the boy returned, and this time he buried more treasure. That was when the narrator was forced to bring the treasure box back to the family. He thought he would receive an apology, but no. The mother not only did not apologize, but also showed her annoyance. He was just using his imagination. Why can't you let him have some fun? Her next words were like a knife. "Your grass isn't that pretty anyway." An insult hidden in plain sight, as if the adult's right to maintain private property were something to be bargained with a child's imagination. If it had ended there, it might have been just a small neighborhood story. But no. That night, the narrator received a long text message from the mother. Content: accusations. That he had humiliated her son. That he had ruined the childhood of a child. That the child had cried for hours because he believed the neighbor was the villain in the story. From that point on, it was no longer about the lawn. It became a larger question about how adults react to each other, about how a reasonable action can be twisted into excessive, and about who is teaching whom to take responsibility. This story, after all, is not really about grass or holes in the ground or imaginary treasure. It's a slice of how two generations, and two types of adults view personal rights, boundaries, and parenting. The narrator is an introverted adult who lives within his own limits and knows his own and others' boundaries. He's not against children, he's just defending his own space. But his actions are interpreted as hurtful, intolerant. The mother, on the other hand, represents the "everyone has to be sympathetic to my child" mindset, and uses creativity as an excuse to excuse her child's behavior. For her, the child is the center of everything, and everyone around her must accommodate whether it offends others or not. And the boy? He's a living image of imagination, innocent but unguided. He doesn't mean to harm anyone. But because he's not properly guided, his innocence becomes a problem. At first, I thought it was just a simple child's game, something that would pass as quickly as the first rains of the season. A tin can buried in the garden. A boy with a rich imagination who thought he was the captain of a mighty pirate ship. And I, a loner who loved quiet, suddenly became an unwilling treasure island in his imaginary journey. But then just a few days later, my patience began to run out. That morning, as I was taking my coffee cup to the back porch, intending to enjoy 15 minutes of peace before starting a new day, I almost stumbled upon a hole. It was right in the middle of the yard, obviously newly dug, the soil still damp and dirty. In the hole was a plastic bottle, inside of which was a rolled-up piece of paper. "Foul man, ye be cursed. Return the gold or face the wrath of dead leaf pirates." I stood there stunned. I didn't know whether to laugh or sigh. It seemed like I had broken my role too much in the boy's fantasy pirate play. And he was not satisfied. I went to clean up the dirt, covered the hole, and threw the paper in the trash. But inside me, a very strange feeling began to creep in. Tiredness. Not because of the boy's actions, but because I felt that something was wrong. As if someone was gradually pushing me away from the normal boundaries of life. A few hours later, I received a text message from an unknown number. "You are so cruel. My son was just playing. Why did you make him so sad?" I knew right away that it was the boy's mother. I sighed and did not reply. But that same day, I decided to buy a small security camera to install in the backyard, not to monitor or retaliate, but just to have clear evidence if things went further. Little did I know that just a few days later, that decision would save me from a disaster. Saturday morning, I got up early to mow the lawn. But as I opened the back door, my foot slipped into a hole, this time bigger, deeper, and more dangerous. I fell, my knee hitting the edge of the brick. I screamed in pain trying to get up, then stopped when I saw something sticking out of the ground. A rusty kitchen knife. I was speechless. For a moment my mind went blank. What if I hadn't noticed it sooner? What if another kid had fallen in? What if someone had been seriously injured? There was no doubt about it. This had gone too far. I called the police immediately. While I waited for them to arrive, I checked the security cameras. Just as I thought last night, a small figure had snuck into the garden. It was the boy, carrying something shiny. He dug a hole, buried the object, and then retreated like a tiny spy. The police arrived, I explained everything and showed them the video. They made a report, took pictures of the hole, and confiscated the knife. Only 30 minutes later, the boy's mother appeared, her eyes burning into me. She screamed in front of the police, claiming that I was setting her up to frame her son, that there was no way a child could do such a thing. She even pointed at my face, accusing me of wanting to see her son hurt to satisfy my anger. I didn't answer. I just kept quiet, opened my phone, and showed the video in front of her. Her face changed color for a few seconds. Then, as if she had never seen it before, she turned to the police, changing her tone. "He's just a child. How could a child know how dangerous a knife is?" Once again, she used the child as a shield. But the police were not so easily convinced. They clearly noted in the report that a potentially dangerous sharp object was buried in a private area that was not allowed to be entered. Although they could not conclude that the child had intended to cause harm, they warned the family to control their child before things got out of hand. From that day on, I never saw the boy again. No more "ahoy" in the hot noon. No more scribbled papers, no more holes like mouse footprints. But in return, I also did not see any goodwill from the neighbors. People looked at me as if I was a rude guy who hates children. Even though I did not say anything, did not share, did not refute, the one-sided story spread like wildfire. I became the lonely weird guy, the rigid neighbor who does not like children, the man who likes to use cameras to monitor the neighbors. A week later, I received an anonymous letter in my mailbox. "Plants and grass will eventually rot, but childhood memories will not. Congratulations, you have ruined a boy's childhood." I read the letter, folded it, and put it on the table. And then I looked outside. Where the patched lawn, where the treasure pits had been, was now a patch of young grass, as weak and fragile as the very boundary I had tried to maintain. I had never hated children. I had been a child who loved treasure, loved maps, and dug holes behind the house to find chests of gold like Indiana Jones. But I had never crossed someone else's fence. I had never believed that children have the right to trespass. What I didn't expect was that many adults believed the same thing. I built another fence. Higher. Stronger. Not to keep out children, but to keep out rumors, judgments, and the right to trespass in the name of imagination. The question kept going through my mind. Was I wrong? That I chose to protect my privacy instead of yielding to a strange child? Do I deserve to be considered a villain just because I don't want my backyard to become an imaginary battlefield? And most importantly, if it were you, what would you do? The story I've just told, a seemingly small one about a lawn, a few holes, and a boy with a boundless imagination, is not just a dispute between two neighbors. It is not just a clash between a child and an adult. It is not just digging or overreacting. It is a mirror that reflects a series of deeper, larger questions about boundaries, responsibilities, and the price of silence in modern society. Now pause for a moment. Try to put yourself in my shoes. The man who is considered dry, unapproachable, hates children, and ask yourself, how would you react if a child repeatedly invaded your backyard, digging on his own, leaving behind potentially dangerous holes? Would you smile and let it be because children should be forgiven? Or would you have the right to protect your garden, your peace, and your own safety? 1. Have we become too lenient with the concept of "it's okay for kids"? In this story, the mother never asked her child what he did wrong. She just asked, Why did you make him so sad? Even when her child violated the boundary, caused danger, and was caught on camera, her response was to blame me, the victim, instead of teaching him right from wrong. That leniency, the excuse called kids, is what makes society lose its sense of boundaries. Yes, children need space to imagine. Yes, they need to play. But they should not learn the lesson that they can do anything and will always be defended by adults. If today we defend children's violations with blind tolerance, then tomorrow will we be creating adults who don't know where the boundaries are? 2. The culture of keeping quiet to keep things quiet. Why is it so dangerous? There was a moment I will never forget, when I fell into a hole and saw a knife. It was no longer a harmless game. It was a potentially dangerous situation. But imagine if I didn't have a camera? If I didn't call the police? If I just let it go to avoid trouble? What if the person who fell was another neighbor's kid? Many of us are used to keeping it together. Not wanting to remind the neighbor because we're afraid of offending. Not wanting to call the police because we think it's just a small matter. But that silence, that fear of collision mentality actually helps wrongdoings continue. In my case, if I had kept quiet for another week, I might be in the hospital right now. Or worse, being held responsible for an accident that I didn't cause. 3. Children need limits. Not because they are bad, but because they need to know what is right. I don't hate the child. On the contrary, I used to find him cute, creative, and a little bit naive. But that creativity should not be based on destruction or violating the rights of others. A child does not behave in a certain way. Every behavior is a reflection of how they are raised. If parents don't teach their children that other people's yards are not places to play, who will? And when parents start blaming the victim instead of teaching their child, the problem is no longer the child. We live in an age where personal rights are highly valued. That's good. But when a child's right to imagination takes precedence over the right to privacy and safety of others, something is clearly wrong. For isolation and prejudice, why are victims often pushed out of the community? After I reported it to the police, what surprised me was not the mother's reaction. It was the way the whole neighborhood looked at me. As if I were a monster. The whispers behind my back. The sidelong glances. The avoidance in the local supermarket. I was labeled child hater, difficult, weird. And the most heartbreaking thing? No one came to ask me what really happened. No one. This is a lesson I learned on my own skin. Sometimes just because you stand up for your boundaries, you become a thorn in the side of others. Society prefers gentle, easy, tolerant people to those who say no. But I have no regrets. I would rather be isolated than pretend to smile in a garden full of traps and pitfalls. 5. So who is the real game breaker? If you ask the mother, I am a destroyer of a child's imagination. But if you ask me, the child and her mother are the ones who have destroyed something even more precious. The mutual respect between people who live in the same community. I have never knocked on her door to complain about the noise, never called the neighborhood watch when her car was parked in the wrong place. I have never asked my neighbors to be quiet after 10 p.m. All I ask is, don't dig in my yard. Is that an unreasonable demand? If society considers a child digging in someone else's yard cute, and my reaction over the top, then are we living in a place where unreasonableness is called kindness? Judgment from you, the one listening to this story. Now I leave the conclusion to you, the listener, the viewer, the bystander with a more balanced heart. Backhand index pointing right. Do you think I was wrong to call the police on a 9-year-old? Backhand index pointing right. What would you do if you were me? Keep quiet and fix the holes every week or speak up? Backhand index pointing right. Do you believe that restricting children is cruel? Or is it actually a way to help them grow up safe and respectful? Backhand index pointing right. Is the mother in the story raising her child with blind protection or with true love? And most of all, which side are you on in this story? The side of children need to be forgiven for all their mistakes? Or the side of everyone, big or small, must learn to take responsibility? My story doesn't have a happy ending. I didn't become the child's best friend. His mother didn't repent. My neighbors didn't turn around to greet me every morning. But I lived in peace. My yard no longer had holes. I had a taller, stronger fence, not just to keep people out, but to keep prejudice out too. And you know what? Sometimes building a fence isn't because you hate the outside world, it's because you love the peace inside more than anything else. Studio microphone, now it's time for you to speak up. You've heard the whole story. A small argument, a dug-up lawn, a scream, a call to the police, and then a chain reaction from the neighbors, the community, to the self-esteem and principles of each person. And I believe, whoever you are, a child lover, a liberal or a strict person, a dreamer or a quiet neighbor, you have already formed your own judgment in your heart. So, backhand index pointing right, leave a comment below. Whose side are you on? Do you sympathize with me, the person who is considered difficult just because he won't keep quiet? Or do you think I overreacted to a young child? Speech balloon, have you ever been in a similar situation? The naughty neighbor kid, the irresponsible adult, or you yourself being misunderstood when standing up for your boundaries? Loudspeaker, how would you handle it if you were me? Quietly endure, gently remind, or escalate from the start? Please share, because every true story is worth hearing. Fire, and if you find this video thought-provoking, direct hit like, because it not only helps the video reach more people, but it's also a simple way for you to say, I heard, I felt, and I want everyone to think about this too. Repeat button, share this video with a friend. Who knows, maybe they're also bitterly swallowing the bitter pill over a similar neighborhood issue? Your click could be a wordless comfort to someone who feels out of place in their own community. Handshake, this channel is for you, the one who likes to judge but not judge indiscriminately. At Judgy Tales, we tell true stories. Tornado, sometimes they make you laugh and cry. Broken heart, sometimes they hurt you deeply. Balance scaled, sometimes they make you hesitate between right and wrong. But what we always want is the participation of you. People who are not afraid to think differently, are not afraid to speak their minds, and dare to question both themselves and others. Love letter, so if you love these types of videos, where every story is an open trial, where no one is forever the defendant and no one is the absolute judge, backhand index pointing right, hit the subscribe button. And don't forget to turn on the notification bell so you don't miss a new trial every week. Microphone, finally, I want to ask you this. If your child one day digs a hole in someone else's garden, would you shake hands and apologize, teach your child to correct his mistake, or blame the landlord for hurting the child? The answer not only reflects who you are, but also reveals where our society is going. You could be a mother. You could be a neighbor. You could be the child who was scolded for playing too much, or an adult today who just wants peace but can't get it. Whoever you are, speak your mind in the comments section. No opinion is absolutely wrong. There is only truth from personal experience and fairness from the community. Clapperboard, thank you for listening all the way to this point. This video took hours to create, write, and tell, but if you like it and leave a short comment, it's enough to keep us motivated to keep going. Goodbye, and see you next time at Judgy Tales, where the stories are real, the drama is real, and the judgment is real.